My fiancé asked me to sign a prenup IT was actually transferred documents for my house. I discovered IT 3 days before the wedding. He had already booked a one-way ticket for himself and my best friend. I am sitting at this exact moment on the cold, solid oak flooring of my architecture office located on the ground floor of my own house that I meticulously, carefully, lovingly built with every inch personally planned during 18 months of obsessively supervised construction, surrounded by violently torn fragments of documents that I discovered cunningly hidden inside the elegant Italian leather folder that my Bruno proudly brought home exactly 72 hours ago, saying it was our carefully prepared protective prenuptial agreement drafted by a recommended specialized attorney, when in reality they were forged deeds transferring complete ownership of this residence, valued at $850,000 directly to his name exclusively. And on my right side rests a trembling color printout of international one-way airline ticket reservations with final destination in a Caribbean country without effective extradition treaty with the United States, dated for exactly 2 days after our pompous wedding ceremony, meticulously programmed for 230 guests with total costs exceeding $120,000 paid in full. Stupidly, naively by me believing I was building eternal memories when in reality I was financing my own devastating ruin. And the cruelest detail repeatedly piercing my chest like poison knives is that the second ticket is not in my name but rather Patricia Mendes, my supposed inseparable best friend of 8 complete years, whom I chose as wedding maid of honor, confidant of intimate secrets, collaborative business partner, consoling shoulder during difficult professional moments. My complete true name is Julia Cristina Almeida Santos. I am 38 years old with an apparently professionally successful but disastrously emotionally naive life. I am an architect, graduated with academic honors from a renowned public university 15 years ago, owner of a boutique office specialized in high-end contemporary residential projects, serving demanding clientele willing to pay generously for exclusive personalized design, recognized by 3 regional sustainable innovative architecture awards, and featured in 2 national specialized magazines as an emerging promising professional. I spent an entire decade building a solid, respected career, impeccable professional reputation, comfortable financial independence, modest but significant assets, including this 2,600 square foot house that I passionately designed, incorporating every architectural dream accumulated since idealistic college. And in a matter of a 72-hour devastating discovery, everything revealed itself, built upon a treacherous foundation about to collapse catastrophically, taking along dignity, trust, faith in basic humanity. The absolutely terrifying story that I will now narrate began innocently exactly 2.5 years ago when I met Bruno and Costa at a boring professional networking event organized by the local business association, where I attended reluctantly only because an important client insisted on introducing potentially lucrative contacts. He approached confidently during the break for watery coffee served in fragile disposable cups, commenting intelligently about the previous technical lecture, demonstrating surprising knowledge about the luxury residential real estate market, dark brown eyes fixed on mine, transmitting apparently genuine interest not only in professional aspects but personal ones as well. Disarming smile, revealing perfectly aligned white teeth, softly modulated voice perfectly between respectful professionalism and subtle non-invasive flirtation. We conversed easily, naturally, for 45 minutes that seemed like 15, discovering superficial coincidences that seemed romantically significant. Both born in May 3 days apart, both appreciators of obscure classic French cinema, both practitioners of morning running, preferring quiet tree-lined parks to noisy crowded gyms. He asked for my professional number, claiming interest in consulting about a potential real estate investment he was seriously considering, and naively, stupidly, blindly, I gave him my elegant business card without questioning absolutely anything about the veracity of his stated interest. The first call occurred 2 days later, rainy Thursday in March at exactly 7:15 p.m. when I was finalizing an urgent project with tight deadlines, politely apologizing for the inappropriate time but explaining that weekdays were absolutely impossible due to unavoidable professional commitments with important clients scattered throughout the city. We talked pleasantly for 37 minutes about absolutely nothing particularly significant, but everything surprisingly comfortable. His voice transmitting apparently genuine warmth through the digital phone line. Easy, natural laughter responding to my banal comments, transforming them into shared jokes. And when he finally asked if I would accept a casual dinner the following weekend at an authentic, modest Italian restaurant he knew far from overcrowded tourist areas, I accepted immediately. Without the protective hesitation I normally rigorously applied to mail invitations after a series of disappointing previous relationships. That first dinner established a pattern that would continue consistently during the initial months of progressive relationship. Bruno was obsessively attentive without being suffocating, financially generous but not vulgarly ostentatious. Apparently genuinely interested in my architectural projects, listening patiently to detailed technical descriptions that normally bored people outside the profession. Consistently respectful of physical and emotional boundaries clearly established from the beginning. Naturally funny, without excessive effort, conversationally intelligent about varied topics, demonstrating broad cultural education. He presented himself professionally as an independent financial consultant specialized in alternative investment portfolios for discreet clients preferring absolute privacy, vaguely explaining that the confidential nature of his work prevented discussing specific client case details under rigorous legally binding non-disclosure agreements. Retrospectively analyzing coldly with brutal clarity acquired through recently revealed betrayal, I realize what is obvious now, that his professional description was perfectly calibrated to justify absence of concrete verifiability, no publicly visitable physical office claiming to work remotely from home for maximized efficiency. No substantial online presence on professional networks claiming preference for traditional face-to-face personal networking. No specifically referenceable clients due to supposedly absolute contractual confidentiality, erratic inconsistent schedules justified by frequent meetings with international clientele in diverse time zones requiring extreme flexibility. But in that initial moment, blindly in love, I interpreted all these characteristics as signs of a sophisticated, successful man operating at elevated professional levels, inaccessible to conventional common people. 6 months after that first casual meeting at that forgettable networking event, Bruno casually suggested during a Sunday morning walk in our favorite park that it would be convenient if he kept some clothes and basic personal items at my house, considering the frequency with which he was sleeping there spontaneously after prolonged dinners, transforming into conversations well into dawn. I agreed promptly, cheerfully, interpreting the suggestion as healthy, natural progression of an organically maturing relationship. And within 3 weeks, he had gradually, imperceptibly transferred the majority of his personal belongings to my room, transforming empty drawers and half of the spacious closet into shared territory. I never visited his apartment, allegedly located in a distant opposite neighborhood of the city, because he always had plausible, reasonable excuses. Noisy structural renovation in progress, making the environment temporarily uninhabitable, conflictual, disturbing neighbors, creating a hostile, unpleasant atmosphere, inconvenient location too far from both our workplaces, making it logistically impractical. Patricia, my reliable best friend of 8 complete years, whom I met when we first collaborated together on a complex, challenging residential project where my architecture met her interior design, creating exceptional creative synergy enthusiastically. Recognized by the satisfied client, adored Bruno instantly from the first casual introduction. During a relaxed triple dinner at a casual seafood restaurant, she praised repeatedly, effusively, how perfectly suitable he seemed to be for me specifically, observationally commenting how positively different he was compared to problematic previous boyfriends she had known and witnessed over the years, cheerfully insisting that finally I had found a deserved, compatible, balanced partner. Retrospectively, with bitter poison of revealed betrayal contaminating every previously sweet memory, I realized that her exaggerated enthusiasm was not genuine friendly support, but disguised personal interest, strategically planning from the beginning. 1 year and 4 months after we officially began exclusive dating, Bruno organized an elaborate romantic surprise, proposing to me during an extended weekend at a charming boutique and located in a preserved colonial, historical town 4 hours away. Traditionally kneeling during a candlelit dinner on a private balcony with panoramic view of misty mountains at golden sunset, presenting a modest but elegant diamond solitaire ring that he claimed to have personally chosen after weeks. Researching specialized jewelry stores looking for the perfect unique piece, I accepted emotionally, crying uncontrollably with genuine happiness, naively, stupidly believing that I had finally, deservedly, found a reliable, loyal partner to build a stable, secure, shared future. Wedding planning consumed 8 subsequent months of considerable emotional energy and substantial financial resources. I hired a renowned wedding planner enthusiastically recommended by Patricia, who coincidentally knew her professionally through previous collaborative projects. I reserved a sophisticated event space at a traditional historic club with stunning landscaped gardens perfect for romantic outdoor ceremony. I ordered a custom-made wedding dress from a talented emerging designer in 3 meticulously adjusted fittings. I organized a gourmet buffet tasted and unanimously approved by Bruno, Patricia, and my sister Mariana during a comparative evaluation session. I selected an award-winning photographer whose portfolio demonstrated ability to capture authentic, genuine emotions instead of stiff, artificial poses. Costs accumulated quickly, alarmingly exceeding the conservative initial budget established rationally, but Bruno generously repeatedly insisted that a wedding happens once ideally, so it deserved a significant memorial investment, not skimping meanly on important details that create precious eternal memories. He contributed financially, occasionally with specific partial payments, claiming traditional masculine embarrassment at not being able to cover costs entirely due to strategic commercial investments, temporarily immobilizing available immediate liquidity, but promising to compensate generously after substantial returns materialized as confidently projected. I interpreted the explanations as admirable, honest financial transparency instead of retrospectively obvious warning signs that I should have vigorously investigated and questioned. Patricia was enthusiastically involved in every planning decision, offering frequently solicited opinions, accompanying me on tiring, lengthy shopping trips for detailed decorative accessories, testing buffet dishes with me, laughing together about strange experimental combinations. And retrospectively, I now realize that her excessive closeness during the process was not loyal, friendly support, but disguised territorial recognition of the man who was already secretly stealing from me emotionally and financially. 3 weeks before the meticulously programmed wedding date, Bruno arrived home on an unusual Tuesday afternoon carrying an elegant, expensive Italian leather folder I had never seen before. Facial expressions seriously composed, contrasting with his characteristically habitual casual relaxation. Formally requesting that we sit comfortably for an important necessary discussion about sensible matrimonial legal protections that a specialized attorney had recommended we implement proactively before the official ceremony. My stomach instinctively contracted uncomfortably, but immediate mental rationalization convinced me it was simply modern responsible financial prudence, especially considering that we both possessed individual assets accumulated independently before the relationship began. He opened the folder, revealing voluminous documents professionally stapled, printed on apparently legitimate official letterhead paper from a respectable law firm, calmly pedagogically explaining that a prenuptial agreement was an increasingly common practice among enlightened contemporary couples, mutually beneficially protecting individual patrimonial interests in case the relationship unfortunately ended in the future, repeatedly reassuringly emphasizing that he absolutely did not anticipate needing to activate the established protections, but it was mature adult responsibility to implement preventive safety. I leafed through the documents, superficially tired after an intense workday finalizing a demanding client project with impossible deadlines. Dense, impenetrable legal text written in incomprehensible specialized technical language progressively confusing me, and when I hesitantly questioned whether we should consult our own independent attorney before signing something so important and significant, Bruno responded softly, persuasively, that the documents had been equitably prepared, protecting both equally, that hiring an additional attorney would simply unnecessarily duplicate costs wastefully, squandering financial resources already extensively committed to the rapidly approaching wedding. That fundamental mutual trust in a healthy relationship should overcome unjustified, distrustful paranoia. I signed each indicated page stupidly, confidently, naively, without completely reading or fully understanding the devastating implications deliberately hidden in obscure, deceptive legal language, my signature flowing automatically through 15 dense pages while Bruno pointed to appropriate locations previously marked with small yellow stickers, his hand occasionally touching my back reassuringly while murmuring loving appreciations about how understanding, reasonable, and mature I was being regarding sensible financial precautions. He immediately stored the signed documents back in the elegant folder, saying he would deliver them to the responsible attorney for necessary notary registry. And I questioned absolutely nothing because I blindly, stupidly trusted the man I believed I was building an honest, transparent, shared future with. 3 days after that fateful, irreversible signing, exactly 72 hours before the programmed wedding, when I should have been finalizing last-minute organizational details, verifying supplier confirmations, florist, photographer, musicians, I received an unexpected, disturbing call from Roberto Alva, a respected civil attorney specialized in real estate law, who had legally assisted during the purchase of this land and construction of this house years earlier. His voice transmitted evident professional concern through the phone line when he urgently requested that I immediately come to his office for an extremely important confidential discussion, not specifiable over an insecure phone, uncommonly grave tone activating dormant instinctive alarms. I drove nervously to his office, located in a respectable modern commercial building, hands sweating cold against the leather steering wheel, heart beating irregularly, anxiously anticipating devastating news without knowing specifically what nature it would have. Roberto personally received me at the office door, facial expression seriously concerned, confirming terrible intuition. Gently but firmly conducted me to a comfortable chair in front of his impeccably organized desk. He sat down heavily, breathing deeply before beginning to speak, fingers interlaced on the desk, penetrating brown eyes fixing on mine, simultaneously transmitting professional compassion and genuine concern. Julia, I need to be completely direct and honest with you about something extremely serious. Disturbing that I accidentally discovered through my professional connections in the real estate registry system when I was routinely processing annual cadastral update of regular client properties. Roberto began pausedly, carefully choosing each word like a surgeon, selecting precise instruments, grave voice loaded with professional weight but also genuine human compassion. 3 days ago, I received an automatic alert from the system indicating suspicious registry movement involving your residential property, which I initially assumed to be a banal administrative error of the notoriously problematic electronic registry. But when I investigated more deeply out of habitual professional precaution, I discovered something absolutely alarming, potentially criminal, that you need to know immediately before it's too late to legally reverse the devastating consequences. He slid across the organized desk a thick manila folder containing photocopies of stamped official documents, strategically highlighted with yellow and red fluorescent markers indicating particularly concerning critical sections. My heart began instinctively accelerating, palms sweating cold as I opened the folder, trembling slightly. Eyes quickly scanning dense pages of initially incomprehensible technical legal text. These documents that you signed 3 days ago thinking they were a standard protective prenuptial agreement are absolutely not that at all. Julia, they are deeds of complete, irrevocable, definitive property transfer of your house, valued at $850,000, directly to Bruno Enrique, Costa's name exclusively, completely removing your name from all official property records as if you had never been the legitimate owner. Roberto explained methodically, specifically pointing to clauses highlighted in intense red. The professionally decorated meeting room in relaxing neutral tones began spinning vertiginously around me like an uncontrolled carousel, while seeming to compress claustrophobically as I tried to process, understand, accept his words that seemed to be arriving through a long, distorted tunnel. This makes absolutely no sense. There must be a grotesque error. Colossal misunderstanding. Bruno explained each clause of the agreement to me in detail, said repeatedly that it protected both equally, that it was normal standard procedure recommended by his respectable specialized attorney. I stammered defensively, desperately, voice sounding strange, artificial to my own ears, hands gripping the edges of the folder like a life raft in a stormy ocean. He would never do something so monstrous, cruel. We're getting married in 3 days. We planned a future together for 2 complete years. This must be a terrible administrative mistake, documentary confusion that can be easily clarified with some simple explanatory phone calls. Roberto slowly, sadly shook his head, facial expression transmitting deep compassion mixed with helpless frustration of an experienced professional who has already witnessed infinite variations of similar devastating conjugal frauds. Julia, dear, I perfectly understand your natural defensive reaction. Psychological need to deny brutal reality presented suddenly without adequate preparation. But I need you to listen carefully, rationally process what I'm saying, because time is running out quickly. These documents were officially registered exactly 72 hours ago at the competent real estate registry office, with all signatures authenticated, official stamps validated. According to current Brazilian legislation, property transfer becomes legally effective, binding after public notary registration regardless of the signatory's real intention or complete understanding of the signed clauses. You literally, legally are no longer the owner of this house that you personally built from the foundation. He emphasized each final word slowly, clearly, allowing the complete gravity of the situation to penetrate through my desperately resistant psychological defenses. Heavy, suffocating silence filled the office for long, interminable 30 seconds, while devastating information finally began crossing layers of protective denial, gradually reaching conscious understanding like slow poison disseminating through the circulatory system. How is this legally possible? How does the registry office accept, register, validate a document transferring property without physical presence of both parties, without independent verification of identities, without questioning suspicious circumstances involving substantial property being transferred, gratuitously, without apparent documented financial compensation? I questioned with a progressively louder, hysterical voice, anger beginning to replace initial paralyzing shock. There are safeguards, legal protections precisely to prevent frauds of this monstrous type. Someone somewhere should have noticed obvious irregularities, triggered alarms, requested additional verifications before processing such a financially significant transaction. Roberto sighed heavily, removing his gold-framed glasses and rubbing tired eyes with index finger and thumb in a gesture revealing professional frustration accumulated with a chronically flawed system. In idealistic theory, you are absolutely correct about how the system should protectively function. In brutal practical reality, Brazilian registry offices are notoriously overloaded, underfinanced, operating with insufficient, inadequately trained personnel processing hundreds of daily transactions under extreme temporal pressure. Documents apparently in formal order with authenticated recognized signatures, professionally printed official stamps are routinely accepted without in-depth investigative scrutiny. Bruno clearly knew exactly how to cynically exploit these systemic vulnerabilities. Meticulously prepared, superficially convincing falsified documentation that passed through superficial bureaucratic verifications without raising immediate suspicions, he explained pedagogically, carefully replacing his glasses. Hot tears began flowing uncontrollably down my face as the complete reality of calculated betrayal finally fully penetrated through all remaining emotional defenses. He planned this meticulously for months, probably. Studied every necessary legal detail, professionally forged documents, waited for the maximally vulnerable moment when I was emotionally exhausted from wedding planning stress to present fraudulent papers. I blindly, stupidly trusted, signed without completely reading, because he was my fiancé, the person I deeply loved, with whom I planned to build an entire shared life. How was I so naive, idiotic, blind, not to perceive obvious signs that retrospectively must have been screamingly evident? I sobbed uncontrollably, body trembling convulsively as I processed the complete extent of systematic manipulation. Roberto respectfully rose from the executive chair, circled the desk to stand beside me, placing a comforting hand gently on my trembling shoulder in a compassionate paternal gesture. Julia, listen carefully to what I'm going to say now because it's absolutely crucial that you understand this completely. Internalize it deeply. You were not naive, stupid, or blind. You were the victim of an experienced professional predator specialized in exploiting natural human trust, reasonable expectations of honesty in intimate relationships. Men like Bruno systematically study manipulative psychology, persuasion techniques, emotional vulnerabilities. They are consummate fraud artists practicing for years, probably victimizing multiple people previously before directing predatory attention specifically to you. The guilt, shame you're feeling now are exactly the emotional reactions he calculated, anticipated. Wants you to experience because emotionally broken women, paralyzed by self-flagellation, are less likely to aggressively seek justice, legally fight for stolen rights. He said firmly, authoritatively, voice carrying professional conviction of decades dealing with traumatized victims of similar patrimonial frauds. I breathed deeply, irregularly, desperately trying to recover some minimal emotional control over involuntary physical reactions of the traumatized body. What can I do now immediately, urgently, to reverse this fraudulent transfer? Legally recover my property before he manages to sell it to insider parties or heavily mortgage it, creating additional, impossible to untangle legal complications? Later, is there some emergency legal recourse, judicial injunction that can temporarily freeze the transaction while a criminal investigation is appropriately conducted? I asked with growing urgency, mind beginning to function strategically again after initial paralyzing shock, methodical architect professional instincts gradually resurfacing through the emotional fog. Roberto returned to his chair, opening a side drawer of the desk and removing a pre-printed legal form, beginning to quickly fill in mandatory fields with impeccably legible handwriting practiced during decades of meticulous legal work. The first critical immediate action is to formally register a detailed incident report of the Specialized Precinct for Patrimonial Crimes today still, preferably within the next 2 hours before the office closes. Simultaneously, I will file an emergency judicial action requesting urgent injunction, suspending the registry transfer based on well-founded allegation of documentary falsification, defective consent, provable fraud. The judge can grant a preliminary injunction within 24 to 48 hours if initially presented evidence is sufficiently convincing, effectively freezing any subsequent transaction involving the property until definitive resolution of the criminal and subsequent civil process, he explained while continuing to quickly, efficiently fill out forms. My mind raced frantically, processing immediate practical implications of the devastating situation beyond traumatic emotional aspects. If Bruno had really legally stolen my house through sophisticated documentary fraud 3 days before the programmed wedding, it logically inevitably meant that he had absolutely no real intention of legitimately marrying me. The pompous, expensive wedding, meticulously programmed for 230 guests in 3 precise days, was simply an elaborate facade, theatrical distraction keeping me emotionally, financially busy while he executed the coordinated final blow. Roberto, if he fraudulently transferred the house 3 days before the wedding, it obviously means he plans to disappear before or immediately after the ceremony, doesn't it? All the elaborate planning, substantial invested costs, detailed preparations were just cruel staging, keeping me distracted, focused on trivial reception details. Flowers, menu, while he orchestrated systematic theft of my laboriously built patrimony. I slowly articulated, each word making brutal reality progressively clearer, indisputable. Roberto gravely nodded, confirming the inevitable logical conclusion I had painfully reached. Statistically based on similar cases I have professionally dealt with during 3 decades of specialized law practice, the typical pattern is the perpetrator disappearing completely 24 to 72 hours before the programmed ceremony, or occasionally on the wedding day itself after receiving substantial monetary gifts from well-intentioned but deceived guests. Some particularly audacious criminals, psychopaths, actually attend the ceremony, convincingly perform false vows, collect generous gifts, and then disappear during the reception, claiming invented, fabricated family emergency. I strongly recommend that you immediately verify whether Bruno is still residing at your property currently, or if he has already begun the discreet evacuation process, progressively transferring personal belongings without alerting you about real imminent intentions of planned permanent disappearance, he pragmatically, professionally suggested. I grabbed my cell phone with visibly trembling hands, dialing the home landline number of the house that apparently was no longer legally mine, although I had passionately designed every inch, obsessively supervised construction during 18 intensely dedicated months. The phone rang 6 long times before dropping to voicemail with my own voice cheerfully recorded months ago, inviting visitors to leave a message after the characteristic beep. I abruptly hung up without leaving a message, immediately trying Bruno's personal cell phone that I knew from memory after 2 years of constant communicative relationship. The call went straight to voicemail without even ringing once, clearly indicating that the device was completely turned off or intentionally blocked. I tried sending an urgent text message through the instant messaging app, but the message showed only a single gray check indicating it was not delivered to the recipient, suspiciously confirming that he had preemptively blocked my number or completely discarded the phone chip. He's not responding to absolutely any form of contact. The home phone rings without answer. Cell phone goes straight to voicemail. Messages are not delivered. This definitively confirms that he has already begun the planned disappearance or is deliberately avoiding any communication with me while finalizing preparations for permanent flight. I reported with a surprisingly calm voice, considering the chaotic interior emotional storm. Shock adrenaline gradually replacing initial despair with emerging iron determination. I need to immediately go to my house to personally verify if he's still there, if his belongings have been removed, if there's any physical evidence of flight planning that can be photographed and documented as additional proof for subsequent criminal investigation and urgent judicial process. Roberto firmly but gently raised a warning hand, facial expression transmitting legitimate professional concern about potentially compromised physical safety. Julia, I completely understand the natural impulse, emotional need to directly confront the situation, personally verify the extent of betrayal. However, I must professionally, vehemently warn you that direct confrontation with Bruno at this moment could be potentially physically dangerous. If he perceives that you discovered the fraud prematurely before completing the elaborately planned escape, desperate, cornered men can react violently, unpredictably, when they perceive that the carefully planned scheme is unexpectedly collapsing. I strongly recommend that you not go alone, unaccompanied under any circumstance. Minimally, take your sister Mariana or request official police escort through a formally registered incident. Report before confronting the potentially volatile, dangerous situation. He advised with unquestionable professional authority based on vast experience dealing with tragic consequences of poorly planned, precipitated domestic confrontations. Professional rationality trained during years of analytical architectural education began reassuming control over primitive emotional reactions, allowing more calculated strategic evaluation of the complex, multifaceted situation. You are absolutely rationally correct. Uncontrolled emotional confrontation at this moment would only potentially harm the subsequent legal case, could result in destruction of critical evidence, or worse, dangerous physical confrontation. I will immediately call my sister Mariana, requesting that she accompany me to the property for cautious preliminary inspection, photographic documentation of any visible relevant evidence. Simultaneously, you can begin preparation of necessary legal documentation for emergency judicial injunction, and I will go directly to the specialized precinct after home inspection to register a detailed, comprehensive, formal criminal incident report. I strategically agreed, mind methodically functioning through necessary next logistical steps, despite persistent underlying emotional chaos. I immediately called Mariana, my sister, 3 years older, brilliant cardiologist, experienced divorcee who had navigated her own traumatic failed marriage for years previously and consequently possessed valuable perspective on devastating conjugal betrayals. Mari, I urgently need you to drop what you're doing immediately and meet me at my house within 20 minutes maximum. I discovered something absolutely devastating, terrifying about Bruno, and I need your presence, support, witness when I inspect the property to verify if he's still there or has already fled cowardly. I can't fully explain details over the phone now, but it's a genuine critical emergency. Not hysterical emotional exaggeration, I said quickly, authoritatively, voice transmitting unmistakable serious urgency that she would instantly recognize did not tolerate questioning or delay. Mariana, professionally accustomed to decisively responding to critical cardiovascular medical emergencies, where seconds determine the difference between life and death, responded immediately without questioning hesitation. Leaving the hospital right now. Julia, I'll be there in exactly 80 minutes. If the situation is genuinely dangerous, as your tone alarmingly suggests, I'll stop at the local precinct on the way, requesting a police officer accompany us as an additional safety precaution. Don't do absolutely anything precipitated, risky before I arrive. Promise me that now, verbally, she firmly insisted, voice-carrying medical professional authority accustomed to being unquestionably obeyed during critical emergencies. I promise to wait for you to arrive before entering the property or attempting any direct contact with Bruno if he's still present. Roberto is here with me, providing necessary legal guidance, and we will immediately begin preparation of emergency injunction judicial action and formal criminal incident report as soon as preliminary residential inspection is photographically documented and completed. I professionally assured her, deliberately breathing slowly, trying to physically control accelerated physiological stress response. After disconnecting the phone call, I turned again to Roberto, who had continued diligently filling out legal forms during my phone conversation with Mariana. My sister will be at the property in approximately 18 minutes and will possibly bring an accompanying police officer as a security precaution. I'm going there now directly to meet her, as agreed. Can you provide me a copy of these fraudulent registry documents for me to take as evidence to present to the detective when I register the formal incident report later today? I pragmatically requested, focusing on necessary next logistical steps instead of diving into a descending spiral of unproductive emotional self. Roberto quickly prepared a new manila folder containing complete photocopies of all relevant documents, chronologically organized with color dividers categorizing different types of documentary evidence, adding his professional business card with multiple contact numbers handwritten on the back for emergency reference. This folder contains everything initially necessary: authenticated copies of registered fraudulent deeds, original property purchase documents establishing you as the historical legitimate owner, my preliminary legal analysis, summarizing immediately identifiable obvious irregularities in the suspicious transfer, my formal letter addressed to the competent police authority offering pro bono legal assistance during criminal investigation due to the obvious gravity of the crime perpetrated against my long-standing client. Take your cell phone completely charged with full battery. Keep the phone line constantly open. Call me immediately if you discover something particularly disturbing, threatening during residential inspection, or if Bruno is present and the situation escalates dangerously. He methodically instructed, handing me the folder along with a brief, comforting paternal hug, completely professionally appropriate given the extraordinarily traumatic circumstances. I drove to my house in a strange dissociative state, mind simultaneously functioning on multiple levels. Autopilot mechanically navigating familiar streets while deeper layers of consciousness frantically processed complete implications of brutally revealed systematic betrayal. The house I had lovingly designed, incorporating every architectural dream accumulated since idealistic college student, built obsessively supervising every detail during 18 dedicated months, carefully decorated, selecting each element expressing authentic creative personality. This house was no longer legally mine. Bruno had stolen through sophisticated documentary fraud not only substantially valued physical property, but also incorporated memories, invested efforts, meticulously built imagined future in that personal sacred space. Property represents more than simple quantifiable monetary value. It represents existential security, financial autonomy, hard-won independence through a decade of dedicated, disciplined professional work. I parked the car on the street in front of the externally visually unchanged family residence. Modern contemporary facade I had specifically designed looking completely normal, tranquil, betraying absolutely no visible indication of the devastating emotional storm occurring internally in the creator-architect's life. The anthracite gray aluminum entrance gate with certified sustainable wood details remained normally closed. Electronic lock system programmed obediently responding to the remote command of the keychain I still functionally possessed. The carefully maintained landscaped front yards showed vibrant, colorful, perennial flowers I had planted months ago, naively imagining they would be appreciatively shared during future decades with a reliable, loyal partner. The cruel irony of visual beauty brutally contrasting with moral ugliness of hidden betrayal did not go unnoticed even through the traumatic emotional fog. Mariana arrived exactly 17 minutes after our phone call, driving a reliable silver compact car, accompanied as promised by a young uniformed military police officer. She had diplomatically convinced through succinct, urgent explanation about a potentially volatile situation necessitating witness authority present. She quickly got out of the vehicle, immediately approaching and hugging me tightly, prolongedly, without saying absolutely anything verbally for long 40 seconds. Simply offering solid, comforting physical presence, stabilizing emotional anchorage. When we finally separated, she held my face between both hands, calloused from cardiovascular surgeon work, looking directly into my now reddened, swollen green eyes from recent crying with her genetically identical but more mature, wisdom-laden, darker green eyes acquired through her own previously painfully won conjugal battles. Whatever we discover inside now, whatever additional evidence of systematically planned betrayal, I want you to know deeply, unquestionably, that you are not alone navigating this devastating storm. I will be by your side unconditionally during every step of this necessary legal, emotional, financial journey to seek deserved justice and rebuild destroyed life brick by brick, day by day. She said with absolute conviction, firm voice, not permitting doubt or argument. Now let's enter together this property that is and will always be fundamentally yours, regardless of what temporarily falsely registered fraudulent documents allege. Photographically document any found relevant evidence, and then initiate formal legal process ensuring that Bruno pays completely, publicly, judicially for the consequences of his criminal actions. I breathed deeply, controlledly, gathering necessary courage while the police officer discreetly positioned himself near the property entrance gate, offering authority presence without being unnecessarily intimidating. Mariana firmly, solidarily held my left hand while my trembling right hand inserted the electronic key into the biometric reader of the sophisticated security system I myself had specified during original house construction years ago, prioritizing protection against external invaders, but never naively imagining needing protection against internal betrayal perpetrated by the person sharing my bed intimately. The main, solid, thermally treated wooden door opened silently on high German hinges that had cost a substantial amount but guaranteed perpetual smooth operation, revealing a familiar, recognizable interior but strangely, subtly altered in initially imperceptible ways. The entrance hall, with brilliantly polished imported Italian porcelain flooring, remained impeccably clean as always. Antique Venetian mirrors strategically hung reflecting natural light filtered through wide-side windows remained positioned exactly where it had always been, but the atmosphere felt fundamentally different, air-loaded with palpable absence instead of expected familiar welcoming presence. We cautiously advanced beyond the entrance hall toward the spacious open-concept living room I had specifically designed to maximize natural sunlight circulation and efficient cross-ventilation, reducing dependence on energetically costly artificial climate systems. Carefully selected minimalist contemporary furniture remained identically positioned. Gray charcoal modular sofa, where Bruno and I had watched countless movies comfortably embraced, seemed slightly angularly displaced a few centimeters. Tempered glass coffee table with exposed concrete base showed light moisture circles where glasses had recently rested without using protective coasters. I always insisted we use. Small details began progressively accumulating, revealing silent story of recent discreet evacuation. Slightly open side buffet drawer showing empty interior where important documents used to be organizedly stored. Bookshelf evidencing irregular empty spaces where specific volumes had been selectively removed, leaving obvious gaps between remaining titles. Decorative shelf absent of our framed photographs that always occupied prominent positions, celebrating supposedly happy shared moments during 2 years of apparently loving but now revealed fraudulently calculated relationship. Mariana systematically photographed each environment, methodically using high-resolution professional cell phone, documenting visual evidence of progressive removal of Bruno's personal belongings, while the police officer noted detailed observations in a small standard black notebook. formally recording preliminary discoveries that would later serve as official testimony during subsequent criminal investigation and inevitable judicial processes. We walked silently through the main corridor toward the master suite bedroom I had specifically designed as a personal private sanctuary, tranquil refuge after stressful, intense workdays. Intimate space, sharing emotional, physical vulnerability with the person I believed I loved, unconditionally trustworthy. The bedroom door was strategically ajar, permitting partial interior vision even before pushing it completely open, and what I saw made my heart contract painfully as if it had been violently squeezed by an invisible giant hand. Meticulously planned shared closet with efficient modular organization system was visibly empty on the side, originally designated for Bruno, solitary hanging metal hangers without hanging clothes. Upper shelves completely devoid of organizing boxers containing diverse accessories, open lower drawers revealing empty interiors lined with perfumed paper I had carefully installed months ago, naively imagining prolonged shared future. The adjacent en-suite private bathroom showed similar signs of systematic evacuation. Mirrored cabinet above the imported Italian Carrara marble double sink evidenced his side completely empty of masculine personal hygiene products, while my side remained intact, unchanged with cosmetics, precisely organized as I always habitually maintained. Tempered glass shelf inside the spacious shower box no longer contained expensive specific masculine shampoo. Bruno insisted on buying imported brands, saying it was necessary to maintain impeccably combed, healthy hair. Fluffy Egyptian cotton towel he exclusively used was absent from the electric towel warmer built into the adjacent wall. I sat heavily on the edge of the king-size bed with premium orthopedic mattress we had jointly chosen after testing dozens of different options in a specialized showroom, dedicating an entire afternoon to the careful selection process. Hands trembling uncontrollably as complete and irrefutable reality of systematically planned, premeditated betrayal penetrated through all remaining layers of protective psychological denial. Bruno had completely evacuated all his personal belongings from the shared residence, probably during the last 3 days while I was frantically busy finalizing last-minute wedding details that would never happen as naively planned. Mariana sat beside me on the bed, hugging me laterally, protectively, while hot tears again flowed uncontrollably down my already swollen, painful face from repeated crying during recent traumatic hours. The police officer maintained himself respectfully distant near the bedroom door, allowing a private moment between sisters, but remaining vigilant. In case the situation escalated unexpectedly, necessitating professional authority intervention, we remained silently embraced for a long 5 minutes before I could recover sufficient emotional composure to continue systematic inspection of the property, seeking potentially relevant additional evidence for subsequent criminal investigation. The home office I had specifically designed for Bruno to work comfortably at home when he wasn't supposedly visiting important clients scattered throughout the city revealed itself particularly devastatingly revealing. Brilliantly varnished Noblewood executive desk was completely empty of the laptop computer he always kept centrally positioned. Open side drawers showed empty interiors without important papers, documents he claimed to keep organizedly stored. Bookshelf of technical finance investment books was completely devoid of volumes he ostensibly frequently consulted during professional phone conversations I occasionally heard through the closed door. The most disturbing, shocking discovery awaited inside the discreet built-in closet located in the office corner where Bruno claimed to store confidential client files under secure lock, preventing unauthorized access. The closet was completely empty, except for a manila folder, apparently accidentally forgotten, pushed to the dock rear corner, probably during rushed hasty evacuation. I opened the folder, trembling with cold hands, anxiously anticipating potentially revealing content, and found absolutely devastating, shocking documents that suspiciously confirmed the complete extent of systematically orchestrated, premeditated conspiracy. The folder contained colored printouts of one-way international airline tickets to a tropical Caribbean destination without effective extradition treaty with the United States, dated for exactly 2 days after the originally programmed date for the pompous, expensive wedding ceremony I had entirely stupidly financed. 2 nominative tickets clearly printed showing complete passenger names: Bruno Enrique Costa and Patricia Mendez, my supposed inseparable best friend of 8 complete years. Carefully chosen wedding maid of honor for naively idealized wedding, reliable collaborative business partner, confidant of vulnerable intimate secrets, was conspiratorially directly involved in the elaborate scheme from planning beginning. Tears of emotional pain instantly transformed into tears of incandescent rage, burning intensely through my entire being as I held the traitorous printouts, with hands trembling not from fear but from primitive visceral fury. Betrayal from love fiancé was already sufficiently, devastatingly, emotionally destructive, but discovering that my trusted best friend was actively conspiratorially participating in the fraudulent scheme added an extra layer of calculated psychological cruelty that seemed almost unbearably painful to emotionally process. How many times had Patricia falsely comfortingly hugged me while secretly planning to simultaneously, treacherously steal my patrimony, my fiancé, my dignity? Mariana read the tickets over my shoulder and audibly hissed a shocked, outraged expression through clenched teeth, visibly controlling the impulse to express colorful profanities she normally avoided pronouncing as a respected professional physician, maintaining clinical composure even under extreme, emotionally provocative circumstances. The police officer professionally approached, requesting to photograph the incriminating documents found as fundamental critical evidence for criminal investigation and subsequent judicial processes against both perpetrators conspiratorially involved in the systematically planned, elaborate, fraudulent scheme. We continued meticulous search through the remainder of the residence, discovering additional evidence revealing complete extent of premeditated planning. Kitchen drawer showed absence of expensive specific culinary utensils. Bruno had allegedly purchased to prepare elaborate romantic dinners for me, but probably always intended to take with him during planned flight. Laundry room closet was empty of specific premium cleaning products he insisted on buying, expensive imported brand. Attached garage revealed empty space where his car normally parked, indicating the vehicle had been permanently removed, probably sold in advance, converted into easily transportable liquid cash. A particularly cruel, disturbing detail was discovering inside a hidden drawer of the bedroom nightstand a small spiral notebook containing Bruno's handwritten notes, apparently accidentally forgotten during rushed evacuation. Pages contained cold, detailed financial calculations, estimating total property value, meticulous chronology of necessary actions to successively execute fraudulent transfer, and most devastatingly personal notes referring to me using cruelly objectifying derogatory terms like target, easy mark, profitable investment. Each handwritten word was an additional stab-piercing, already repeatedly destroyed heart. After completing complete systematic inspection of the entire property, methodically photographing, documenting found evidence, we sat silently in the living room trying to emotionally process the complete magnitude of brutally revealed discovered betrayal. The police officer prepared a detailed formal preliminary report documenting all relevant observations personally witnessed. During official accompanied inspection, providing a copy for me to subsequently take to the specialized precinct when formally registering detailed comprehensive criminal incident report initiating official police investigation. I drove directly from the residence to the specialized precinct for patrimonial crimes, protectively accompanied by Mariana, while the police officer followed separately in his vehicle to provide official testimony corroborating photographically documented preliminary discoveries. The precinct was located in an austere gray exposed concrete government building without interesting architectural decoration. Typical reflection of limited public budgets, prioritizing basic functionality over inspiring aesthetics. But at that specific moment, it represented a sanctuary of potential justice where I could finally formally initiate legal process seeking criminal accountability of perpetrators. The detective responsible for the patrimonial crime sector was an apparently man with perpetually tired expression of an overloaded professional daily dealing with excessive volume of diverse cases, ranging from minor residential thefts to complex multi-million-dollar corporate frauds. However, when I began narrating the complete story in chronological detail, presenting meticulously compiled documentary evidence, his expression progressively transformed from habitual professional tedium to genuinely growing interest, clearly recognizing a particularly flagrant case of systematically premeditated conjugal fraud deserving priority investigative attention. I formally registered a detailed comprehensive criminal incident report during 3 intense hours, patiently answering the detective's specific technical questions while he meticulously noted every relevant detail in the official computerized system, digitally attaching all photographs, documentary evidence collected during accompanied residential inspection. The detective explained following standard investigative procedures. Immediate issuance of search and seizure warrants to locate current whereabouts of Bruno and Patricia through tracking recent financial movements, bank records, credit card transactions, cell phone usage, judicial requests for preventive blocking of identified bank accounts to prevent additional dissipation of fraudulently stolen resources. However, the detective also honestly, brutally warned about realistic practical limitations of this specific type of investigation. Considering severely limited police resources and statistically high probability of perpetrators having already permanently fled to international jurisdiction, extremely complicating subsequent extradition, even if eventually located through international police cooperation. His words were realistically discouraging, but I preferred brutal honesty to optimistic false hopes that would cruelly collapse later when practical reality inevitably imposed itself. In the following emotionally, devastatingly nebulous days that mixed into a confused blur of pain, anger, shame, processing intense psychological trauma, Roberto worked tirelessly preparing comprehensive emergency judicial action requesting multiple urgent protective measures, injunction immediately suspending legal validity of fraudulent registry transfer based on evident defect of consent, provable documentary falsification, judicial blocking of all identified bank accounts linked to Bruno and Patricia, preventing additional financial resource movement, unavailability of registered movable, immovable goods in their names to guarantee eventual compensation for substantial material, moral damages. The judge responsible for the case demonstrated rare human sensitivity, granting preliminary injunction in exceptionally fast deadline of only 36 hours after initial filing, explicitly recognizing a legally grounded decision that presented evidence unequivocally demonstrated systematically planned, premeditated fraud, justifying urgent protective judicial intervention. The registry transfer was temporarily suspended, effectively preventing Bruno from selling the property to innocent third parties or heavily mortgaging it, creating additional complex legal complications, and I technically recovered temporary legal possession of the residence while criminal and civil processes simultaneously proceeded through the notoriously slow judicial system. Cancellation of the meticulously programmed wedding for 230 guests was a logistical nightmare, additional emotional task during an already extremely traumatic, stressful period. Embarrassing, constant phone calls to diverse suppliers, canceling contracted services, losing substantial deposits paid in advance, humiliating text messages to guests informing sudden cancellation without providing shameful specific details about true reasons behind the abrupt decision, return of wedding gifts received in advance from well-intentioned family friends who had enthusiastically celebrated the apparently happy, promising union. Patricia disappeared completely simultaneously with Bruno, as evidenced by the discovered airline tickets confirming her conspiratorial participation in the fraudulent scheme from planning beginning. Her cell phone was permanently turned off or discarded. Social media profiles systematically deleted, eliminating obvious digital traces. Her apartment, where she lived alone, was completely empty when police authorities executed search and seizure warrant, discovering she had prematurely terminated the lease contract 2 weeks before the originally programmed wedding date, paying substantial termination penalty but guaranteeing discreet evacuation without raising premature suspicions. The subsequent police investigation progressively, shockingly revealed that Patricia and Bruno had initiated secret romantic relationship approximately 6 months after I initially introduced them during innocent casual triple dinner. And the conspiracy to steal my patrimony through fraudulent marriage had been meticulously, collaboratively planned for more than an entire year, while both convincingly performed falsified loyalty before me, completely systematically deceiving me. Each comforting embrace from Patra during difficult professional personal moments had been calculatedly staged additional betrayal. Each word of encouragement about relationship with Bruno had been deliberate psychological manipulation, strengthening my naive trust in him. A particularly painful discovery was finding telephone records, obtained through judicial order, revealing that Patricia and Bruno secretly conversed daily through a secret disposable phone number he maintained specifically for hidden conspiratorial communication, discussing scheme planning details while I slept innocently beside him, naively believing we shared genuine, authentic intimacy. Text messages recovered through digital forensic examination of discarded phone found during search and seizure showed cruelly objectifying conversations, depreciatively referring to me planning manipulative strategies to maximize extracted financial value before coordinated final flight. The following months were a prolonged, painful exercise of progressive, gradual reconstruction of completely destroyed life. Intensive psychotherapy sessions 3 times weekly with a psychologist specializing in complex trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, helping process conflicting emotions of anger, pain, shame, guilt, regular weekly meetings with Roberto, discussing slow, frustrating progress of criminal and civil legal processes, simultaneously proceeding through excessively slow bureaucratic judicial system, gradually successful attempts to resume architectural professional work that had been completely neglected during initial acute trauma period. Understanding patient clients, waited patiently while I gradually recovered professional functional capacity, some offering kind, gentle, solidary, encouraging words without demanding embarrassing specific details about Trevor's personal crises, others demonstrating exceptional loyalty, intentionally contracting additional projects to financially help during difficult recovery period. Laboriously built professional reputation during an entire decade remained fortunately intact because I had always maintained clear separation between personal and professional life, never inappropriately mixing spheres. The police investigation eventually located Bruno Bruno and Patricia living comfortably in a tropical Caribbean country using financial resources stolen from me to finance ostentatious, luxurious lifestyle at an exclusive, expensive resort. Savannah's photographs showed them laughing cheerfully without apparent remorse on Paradisío Beach, while I devastatingly suffered emotional financial consequences of their criminal actions. However, the destination country did not possess effective functional extradition treaty with the United States, so perpetrators remained technically beyond reach of American criminal justice despite preventive arrest warrants having been formally issued by competent judges. Roberto creatively explored alternative legal options. International civil action based on international legal cooperation conventions requesting blocking of financial assets in local banking institutions of Caribbean country, formal notification of local police authorities about presence of fugitive criminals in their territory requesting deportation based on diplomatic reciprocity, strategic disclosure of case through media specialized in international fraud, alerting global financial community about perpetrator fraudulent identities, preventing additional victimization of innocent people. After 80 months of persistent, tireless, internationally coordinated legal efforts involving cooperation between American and Caribbean authorities, Patricia committed fatal careless error, typical of amateur criminals, overconfident in perceived impunity. She traveled to neighboring third country that possessed functional extradition treaty with the United States for a prolonged vacation, apparently arrogantly believing she was sufficiently geographically temporally safe from legal consequences. Local authorities previously alerted through international police cooperation arrested her at the airport during immigration process and initiated formal extradition procedures to the United States to face pending criminal charges. Bruno remained cowardly hidden in the original Caribbean country, but his relationship with Patricia apparently dramatically deteriorated after her arrest because he made absolutely no effort to legally or financially assist her during prolonged extradition process, revealing his true selfish nature devoid of authentic loyalty even for conspiratorial accomplice who had betrayed best friend collaborating elaborate scheme. Patricia was formally extradited after 6 months of complex legal bureaucratic procedures and returned to the United States under police custody facing multiple serious criminal charges, qualified fraud, falsification of public documents, criminal organization, formation, money laundering. Patricia's criminal trial occurred 27 months after initial discovery of devastating fraud, facilitated by overwhelmingly robust documentary evidence, meticulously compiled during prolonged police investigation, and my willingness to personally testify in detail about complete extent of systematically planned betrayal. Personally confronting her in court was an intense, emotionally cathartic experience, finally allowing direct expression of devastating impact her criminal actions had caused in my personal and professional life. Patricia initially attempted implausible defense that she had been manipulated, controlled by Bruno against her own will, but documentary evidence, including recovered text messages, unequivocally demonstrated her voluntary enthusiastic participation in fraudulent conspiracy from initial planning stages. The popular jury, composed of ordinary citizens, deliberated only 4 hours before returning unanimous verdict of guilty on all presented charges, and the judge sentenced her to combined penalty of 9 years and 3 months imprisonment in initially closed regime plus obligation of full financial compensation for judicially calculated cause material damages. Bruno remained an international fugitive during subsequent years, cowardly avoiding criminal accountability through prolonged permanence in country without effective extradition treaty. But ironically, his life in self-imposed exile progressively revealed itself less idyllic glamorous than he had probably imagined during initial scheme planning. A specialized private investigator hired by Roberto, through partially recovered financial resources, discreetly monitored his activities, periodically reporting subsequent romantic relationships ending quickly when women discovered his true nature through online searches, revealing news about committed crimes, attempts to establish legitimate businesses failing due to impossibility of obtaining appropriate legal documentation under criminally compromised true identity. Financial recovery was partial but substantially significant through successful civil processes. The house remained legally mine after definitive judicial reversal of fraudulent registry transfer restoring original legitimate property. Patricia's secret bank account discovered during police investigation was judicially blocked and substantial values transferred to me as partial compensation for cause material damages. Vehicle registered in her name was seized, sold in judicial auction, generating additional resources. Total recovered was approximately 65% of total planned wedding costs and diverse material losses quantified by professional accounting expertise judicial examination. More important than partial financial recovery was progressive, gradual emotional recovery laboriously conquered through persistent, intense therapeutic work. unconditional support from close family, especially Mariana, who remained solidarily present during each difficult phase of recovery process, and iron personal determination not to permit cruel betrayal to permanently, irreversibly define my identity or limit future capacity to selectively trust again in deserving people. I painfully but valuably learned critical importance of independently verifying information presented by romantic partners, always consulting independent legal professionals before signing important, significant documents, and trust, but consistently verify. For years after initial traumatic discovery of devastatingly systematically planned fraud, I met Enrique Silva during a charity benefit event organized by Professional Architects Association where I had been, invited to speak about innovative, sustainable residential architecture. He was a 43-year-old widowed civil engineer who had tragically lost his beloved wife to fulminant aggressive cancer 5 years previously after prolonged painful battle, and we conversed naturally comfortably during subsequent reception about different but equally fundamentally transformative, devastating losses experienced. The relationship developed extremely slowly, cautiously, respectfully over subsequent months. Casual coffees without explicit romantic expectations, deep, honest conversations about emotional scars, both caring, authentically sharing vulnerabilities without artificial protective masks. Gradual establishment of trust incrementally built through demonstrated consistency actions repeatedly consistently corresponding to words. Enrique patiently, gently understood that rebuilding capacity to trust after devastating betrayal required generous time not measured by impatient stopwatches but by natural rhythm of gradual progressive emotional healing. Unlike Bruno, who had quickly pressured to live together after only 6 months of dating, Enrique firmly respected clearly established boundaries, patiently waiting a complete 20 months before suggesting we consider cohabitation, and even then insisted we consult an independent matrimonial attorney to prepare legally appropriate cohabitation, agreement equitably protecting both in case the relationship unfortunately ended in the future. His transparency, honesty, dramatically contrasted with Bruno's deceptive manipulation, empirically proving that genuinely trustworthy integral men really existed despite previous traumatic experience, pessimistically suggesting the contrary. 5 years after Patricia's transformative imprisonment and Bruno's cowardly fugitive permanence in Caribbean self-imposed exile, I discreetly, intimately married Enrique in a small, meaningful ceremony held in the private garden of rural property belonging to his family with only 40 carefully selected guests, including Mariana as emotional proud maid of honor, Roberto as honored guest, representing fundamental instrument of restored justice, and close professional colleagues witnessing authentic celebration of deserved new beginning laboriously conquered. Exchanged vows explicitly emphasized egalitarian partnership based on unshakable mutual respect, constant, transparent, honest communication, joint growth through inevitable adversities life would present in the future, and commitment to always protect each other's dignity, autonomy, regardless of relational challenges encountered. The ceremony was deliberately simple, without unnecessary ostentation, prioritizing authentic emotional substance over impressive superficial appearance, reflecting maturity painfully acquired through previous traumatic experiences, teaching valuable lessons about true values of healthy, sustainable relationships. Patricia remains currently incarcerated, progressively serving sentence. Eligibility for parole still distant several years in the future. I occasionally receive unofficial updates through Roberto about her status, participation in rehabilitative prison educational programs, modest paid internal work, generally adequate but not extraordinarily exemplary behavior. I don't feel sadistic satisfaction imagining her confined suffering, because true revenge doesn't reside in causing proportional pain, but in living well, authentically prospering, transforming destructive trauma into shareable wisdom, helping others prevent similar victimization. Regularly volunteered counseling other people traversing similar situations of conjugal patrimonial fraud through a local non-governmental organization specialized in domestic economic violence. Sharing personal story not to glorify victimization, but to concretely demonstrate that recovery is possible. Justice, although slow, is eventually achievable. Reconstruction after devastation is viable with persistent determination, solidary community support, adequate professional resources. Each person helped partially represents redemption of experienced suffering, transforming individual pain into beneficial preventive collective purpose. Today, at 43 years old, with life radically, wonderfully different from the existence I imagined at 38 when I naively signed fraudulent documents, blindly trusting traitorous, fiancé, and conspiring best friend, I paradoxically recognize that devastating betrayal, although extremely painful, was an involuntary necessary catalyst forcing transformative growth that would remain indefinitely dormant within mediocre, comfortable zone of superficial relationships based on deceptive appearances instead of authentic substance. I don't thank for betrayal, nor do I completely forgive their actions, but I serenely recognize that overcome adversity substantially character clarified authentic values taught profound lessons about human resilience, carefully discerned trust instead of naively granted intrinsic value independent of external validation. That fateful afternoon when Bruno made me sign fraudulent papers, deceptively smiling and devastating discovery 3 days before planned wedding, simultaneously marks traumatic end of previous naive life and challenging beginning of consciously, deliberately, authentically reconstructed existence. They may have temporarily stolen house patrimony trust, but ultimately completely failed an implicit objective of permanently, irreversibly destroying me. I was reborn stronger from their devastation ashes like a determined, resilient, triumphant phoenix. And this existential victory infinitely transcends any recovered monetary value or judicially imposed prison sentences. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming betrayal and reconstruction, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. Your story of overcoming also deserves to be told. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are much stronger than any betrayal can temporarily make it seem.